Welcome to Protecting Your Vote, the podcast. I'm Jay Christian Adams, the president of the Public Interest Legal Foundation. We're the nation's election integrity public interest law firm. It's all we do is election integrity, looking at laws, litigating laws, and doing deep dives into what really happened in elections. Today we're going to talk about crimes that occurred, but crimes you might not have heard about, crimes that didn't get a lot of attention. In fact, we're kind of buried in deep sixth. The far left says that voter fraud doesn't exist. Oh, it doesn't exist. You can't find it. It's all a myth. As likely to find voter fraud as you are to find Bigfoot. But one of the things they point to establish this is the low number or non-existence of criminal prosecutions. So if people aren't being prosecuted for voter fraud, then there must not be any voter fraud, right? Well, first of all, I've written extensively about how the Obama administration, Justice Department, deep sixed all voter fraud prosecutions. And those people who are in charge, like Richard Pilger, who's a Department of Justice head of the elections crimes branch of the DOJ, would deep six voter fraud prosecutions in his position at DOJ. Even during the Trump administration, this was happening because of the bureaucrats. So the left likes to say, look, there's no voter fraud prosecution, so there must not be any voter fraud. Well, the Public Interest Legal Foundation pulled the curtain back behind this claim, especially in the state of Florida. And what we did in Florida is documented in a report we've released called Safe Harbor, which you can get at our website, publicinterestlegal.org. And Safe Harbor shows that county election officials in Florida's big counties, the folks who know elections best, made 156 criminal prosecution referrals to county prosecutors, 156 referrals to county prosecutors, bow-tied, gift-wrapped cases for prosecution. And guess how many of those 156 instances of possible voter fraud were ever prosecuted in the state of Florida by county prosecutors? Anyone? Zero. None. Nada. It does not appear that any of the 156 prosecutions that were referred by county election officials in Florida across the biggest counties in Florida in the last couple of elections were ever done anything. Nothing ever happened. Deep sixth, goodbye, no prosecutions. Now, some might say, well, that must mean the cases were bad. Really? 156 in a row by county election officials who thought that a crime occurred and none of them were good enough for prosecution? I don't believe it. Neither do you. What I can tell you about this area is that prosecutors in county offices don't know the first thing about election law. They don't know what a federal registration form is. They don't know what an electronic poll book is. They don't know what the interstate cross-check system is. They don't know the terminology. They don't know the language. And so they chicken out. The other thing is there's a lot of political pressure. Anytime a Justice Department lawyer brings a voter fraud case, like I did when I was at the DOJ, we get attacked personally because that's what the left does. They try to attack and smear anybody who would dare try to make our elections safer. You see it all the time. This is not news to anybody listening to this podcast. So what happens in Florida is 156 potential crimes are found by county election officials, referred to county prosecutors, and nothing happened. Now, you might be asking, oh, are these just all little nitpicky things, right? Somebody stole a pen at the polls. No, that's not what I'm talking about. Let's talk about some of the crimes we found were referred. First of all, double voting. Double voting. Somebody cast two ballots for the same office. That is a felony in Florida. You can go to prison for 5 years in Stark. Fine of $5,000. Obviously, the prison is worse. Assuming another voter's name. Oh, the thing that never happens, that voter ID never has to cure, right? That's all a myth that this occurs, that nobody ever votes in someone else's name. That's what the left will, of course, tell you. But in Florida, there were criminal referrals by county election officials to county prosecutors that went nowhere for double voting and assuming someone else's name. What else was involved? Foreigners voting, aliens voting in American elections. It happens all over the country. We've reported on this. We have found the voter registrations of people who say they're not U.S. citizens and still get registered to vote across the country. You can read it in Stealing the Vote at publicinterestlegal.org. You can read it in Garden State Gotcha, where aliens are registering in New Jersey and voting in New Jersey elections. It's happening all over the country. But in Florida, it happened too, where non-citizens were purportedly voting. County election officials caught them, referred it to county prosecutors, and nothing happens. It's in safe harbor. You can read it at publicinterestlegal.org. There's more. False swearing in voter registration. Somebody says they're a citizen. Somebody says they live a certain place. Someone says they're eligible to vote when they're really not. That is a felony in Florida. And county election officials referred false swearing to county prosecutors, and nothing happened. Again, you can read it in safe harbor. Go to publicinterestlegal.org. There's more. Fake names. Fake signatures on petition drives. Unregistered circulators of petition drives. People going around trying to get something on the ballot. They aren't properly registered by the state. Those are misdemeanors. They were found by county election officials, referred to county prosecutors, and again, nothing happened. Now, you can read all of the details at Safe Harbor. 156 referrals from 9 county supervisors of elections where nothing happened. Now, it gets even worse because a 10th county, Hillsborough, that's where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers play. Tampa is in Hillsborough County, huge city. The supervisor of elections in Hillsborough, when we asked them, show us all of your referrals of crimes to county prosecutors, he got very Soros-y on us. He got very squirrely and said, oh, I'm sorry, on principle, we don't do that. We don't refer possible crimes to county prosecutors. Now, mind you, this is the county election official who took an oath to uphold the laws of Florida, to enforce the laws of Florida, and has just given criminals a pass all throughout Hillsborough County. So don't tell me that voter fraud doesn't exist because there's no prosecutions for voter fraud. Okay? Don't try to think that we're that dumb when you say that the lack of prosecutions has anything to do with how much voter fraud there is. Now, we followed these referrals to county prosecutors through all of the Florida criminal databases and court records where they were available, and it didn't look like there was follow-through. There didn't look like they did anything regarding these referrals in any of the counties. I don't know why they didn't. I do know, as I said earlier, that there is usually a tax on prosecutors. Prosecutors don't know how to do this. But there's no deterrence in a system where county election officials find possible crimes, because remember, they're on the front lines. They're the folks who are working on the front lines in elections that see things up close and know the facts the best and refer them to county prosecutors, and nothing happens. So what kind of deterrence is that? Now, I wish I could say this is only happening in Florida, but it's not. It's happening all around the country. It's happening in North Carolina, where county prosecutors are being attacked for enforcing the law in North Carolina. It's happening in Department of Justice's office, at U.S. attorney offices around the country, where U.S. attorneys across the country went to Main Justice in Washington, D.C., and said, I have a voter fraud case. I want to prosecute it. And Richard Pilger at Main Justice, Election Crimes Branch, said, no, don't do that case. It happened over and over again. I've heard from multiple U.S. attorneys who tried to prosecute cases. As a matter of fact, Attorney Jeff Sessions, Attorney General of the United States, Jeff Sessions, saw Richard Pilger at an event that the Justice Department was holding and said, I understand you're doing this and it needs to stop. And that might be why 2 cases got through in Texas and North Carolina for alien voting. But that was it. Nothing else got through during the Trump administration because of Richard Pilger. Now, at the end of the Trump administration, you might remember Richard Pilger. He is the man who, after the election, in a very sanctimonious way, resigned from his position. Remember that? He was the head of the Election Crimes Branch, and he resigned from his position. But what Mr. Pilger didn't do is resign from his job. like I did when I was at the Justice Department. He didn't quit. He just quit doing his job. And he moved over to an office and sipped coffee for a couple of weeks. And after the inauguration, guess where Mr. Pilger is back? What job he has. He's once again head of the Election Crimes Branch at the United States Department of Justice. So that shows you how the swamp works. It shows you why voter fraud doesn't get prosecuted. And it shows you it doesn't look like there's consequences. Now, what are they going to do about it in Florida? Here's the good news. Governor DeSantis in Florida has proposed a fix. And that fix is to create a state unit, not a county unit that's been dropping the ball, but a state unit to prosecute voter fraud. In other words, specialist election lawyers, seasoned criminal prosecutors without fear are going to be working out of Tallahassee if Governor DeSantis' plan is put into effect to prosecute these 156 cases. And that's just in the big counties. 156 cases of voter fraud potentially occurring that was never prosecuted. So it has to move through the Florida legislature. Let's hope it does, because Governor DeSantis recognizes the problem. And one of the reasons people say there's no voter fraud is because there's no prosecutions. We now know that that is a lie, that is a hollow and empty piece of evidence, because county prosecutors are not prosecuting voter fraud, at least in Florida, and we know around the country. My name's J. Christian Adams. The Public Interest Legal Foundation is the nation's only public interest law firm dedicated exclusively to election integrity. That's all we do all the time, have for a long time. Thank you very much. Your support makes this podcast possible. You can find us at publicinterestlegal.org. I'm J. Christian Adams. You've been listening to Protecting Your Vote, the podcast. Be back again next time with lots more inside information about how elections are actually being run. Thank you very much for your time.